My name's Ben Tipney. I run an organisation called MedLed. We're involved in the training, coaching and consultancy in the field of human factors and performance science, specifically with the healthcare industry. My background isn't clinical. My background is in high performance sport and education. So I was part of the GB rowing team for a number of years, from 2001 to 2005. And when I retired at the grand age of 23 with a back injury, I got into coaching, and the sort of short version of the story is when I was involved in coaching within rowing and at every different level, which was from little kids all the way up to people competing at the World Championships. A lot of what we ended up focusing on was nothing to do with rowing. It was the systems people were working in. Was the system set up to help them succeed, or was the system setting them up to fail? How were we supporting them effectively with the training program and everything else that was around them? And also how the teams function. Why do some teams gel? Why some don't? What can you do about it? How people handle pressure? What can you do about that? And I didn't use terms like human factors or human performance or non-technical skills or any of that stuff. We just did what we needed to do to achieve high performance. And over the last 10, 15 years, I've sort of progressively, I kind of initially broadened, and I did quite a bit of corporate work and individual coaching, work in sort of mentoring and pastoral work in education. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, I started doing work with teams in healthcare, both with the NHS and the private sector. And that's really become my focus over the last 5 or 6 years. We're all going to need to use our healthcare system at some point. We are all patients effectively. It's something that I think matters to all of us. I think we take our healthcare systems for granted in the developed world, and particularly if you think about in the UK having our NHS, we perhaps take that for granted sometimes. And I think that there's an awful lot we can do to build on what it does well and improve it. And I think it's something we've become really passionate about. I think that's a really, really good question, and I think there's loads to learn from other industries. And no matter where we are or what we're doing, people are people, and the principles of how people think and how people behave are consistent. And I think it is really important for healthcare to look for learning from other places rather than trying to necessarily reinvent the wheel all the time. There's loads of useful learning. However, and this is shamelessly steal this quote from a guy called Ken Catchpole, who's one of the sort of globally recognised expert in the field of human factors in healthcare. And the phrase he used, which I think is really spot on, is we need to translate, not transplant. I think you need to look for learning from lots of other areas. Healthcare has a history of looking to civil aviation as a platform for learning, and there's no doubt there's loads of, I have pretty much my whole family work or used to work in that industry. A lot of my friends work in that industry. So I've kind of been surrounded by it my whole life, and there's no doubt there's loads of useful stuff to learn. In the same way, there's loads of useful stuff to learn from the fire service, from the police, from elite sport, from education, from the commercial sector. There's loads of stuff to learn from all over the place. Could be the armed forces. But no one industry can be the model for healthcare. And I think what we have to do is we have to look at what works and what doesn't work in somewhere else, strip it back to its component parts, and then look at, well, how do we apply those components of performance appropriately to healthcare? And the other thing I think that's unique about healthcare, and I think it's important we're not defensive in healthcare and say, well, healthcare is different, therefore what they do doesn't apply to us. We need to be open. At the same time, on the flip side, the difference with healthcare is that healthcare isn't one industry. It's a whole collection of industries all wrapped up together under one banner. It's to me almost comparing, community mental health to an operating theatre is like comparing table tennis to basketball. Yes, both involve a ball, but that's where the similarity ends. Yes, the underlying training of some of the healthcare professionals in those two areas might be similar, but they're very, very different. Therefore, the model of safety, the model of high performance is very different in those different environments. Therefore, I feel I talk a lot about having a wide-angle lens on performance. But ultimately, if you've spent 20 or 30 years working in one industry with one model of performance that works really well there, inevitably, and as we know, this is part of human factors, we all carry cognitive biases. When you come into healthcare, you're going to apply that mindset, that mental model, that model of performance to that environment. And so you need a collective. So you need a collection. So in our team, we have people from a whole raft of different industries, from a whole raft of different academic backgrounds, which enables us to have a wide-angle view on performance and safety. I think that's it depends a lot on where they sit in the organisation, and I mean there's two things to consider here: where they sit within the sort of organisational hierarchy in an organisation, the amount of sort of management leadership responsibility they have in an organisation, and also which sort of area they sit in. And this is something we're thinking about and talking about quite a lot at the moment. What aspects of human factors and the principles of human performance and high-performing teams and leadership are applicable with different groups of staff. So for frontline staff, who at that time don't necessarily have a formal management responsibility, there will be certain things around the finer points of system design that may not be the most useful for them. However, thinking about how they interact, so a nice way of describing human factors is it's about interactions. How people interact with each other, how people interact with equipment, how people interact with the environment, and how all those interactions influence each other. And it's thinking about which of those interactions, A, are most important to a particular set of people, and B, what can they do something about? So if I'm a junior doctor or a frontline member of the nursing staff or physio or something like that, the bit I can control is probably how I interact with the team around me. So that might be the most important thing to that group of people. However, there's also, I think, a place for people at the front line to understand and potentially have some tools to understand and analyse some of the systems of work around them to become, if you like, more intelligent consumers. So, for example, when they are presented with a new piece of equipment, to think about actually how can I have a language and an understanding that's such that I can give feedback on how that might actually work in practice, because we get this gap between work as imagined and work as done, where people are presented with rules, guidelines, processes, pieces of equipment, new layouts of their environment, and they kind of know it doesn't work. So the work is done in practice doesn't fit the work as imagined by the person implementing it. So giving people a language, set of tools where they can actually feed that back further upstream and therefore improve the system around them, because ultimately it's always preferable to improve the system rather than focus on the individual. We come back to what's the biggest asset in our healthcare system. The biggest asset in our healthcare system is the people in it. Whether you think about the NHS or the private sector, we are incredibly lucky. We have amazing people doing amazing things, most of the time doing a really good job under difficult circumstances. Very often, it's very rarely when things go wrong is it because people don't have the knowledge and skill to do the job. Of course, that does happen occasionally, but it's pretty rare. And of course, it's even more rare that people set out to do harm. Okay, it very occasionally happens, but it's very, very rare. If things aren't working, we're not setting people up to succeed. So the question for me is, I guess the way I envisage patient safety is to think, how do we create circumstances, how do we create it within our healthcare system such that we get the best out of the people that we have? That to me is the future of patient safety. How do we set things up such that we get the best? I think historically we've talked a lot about human limitations, almost see the person as a liability to be mitigated. We talk about mitigating human fallibility. And in certain really controlled environments, and typically if you talk about commercial aviation, they will talk about mitigating human fallibility because you can control the environment. It's quite a sort of safety one environment where you put controls in place to eliminate risk as far as possible. Of course, that's not practical in many of healthcare environments, which leads us more into a sort of what we'd often call a safety two mindset, which is about understanding the messy reality of day-to-day work. And it's seeing people as a resource, not as a liability. Yes, we need to think about human fallibilities. Yes, we do need to think about our human limitations and the way we look after ourselves, the way we look after each other. That is massively important. But we also need to think about human capabilities. How do we set things up? Whether it's the way our teams function, whether it's the way managers and leaders conduct themselves to get the best out of the people that they're looking after, or whether it's the systems of work that we set up, the equipment we provide. Does that allow us to get the best from the people we have? Because we have a lot of people working in our healthcare systems, and I'm not sure we're always getting the best out of them. Yes, of course, we do need more people as well, and that's of course a whole other discussion. That's a whole other piece of work. Is how do we attract and retain these good people? Because I think that is a big concern. A lot of qualified, skilled people are leaving the profession. That's something we need to identify reasons, strategies to reduce that. I think a lot of people have inspired me over time. I might sound a bit corny, but I'm constantly inspired by the people that I work with. The people that attend our training courses, the people I go and work with and observe and coach in all of the trusts. Every single time I'm hit with this thought, I don't think I could do your job. I'm constantly amazed by the hard work and skill of the people delivering healthcare in our system. So I genuinely am inspired by the people that we work with in the sort of the work that we do. If I was to pick an individual, I'd probably say Martin Bromley. I think, and I'm sure a lot of people would say that, and I think we wouldn't be having the conversations we're having now if it wasn't for the work. And I know he's very humble about the work he's done, and would acknowledge a lot of other people in that as well. But I think his work has been fundamental to allowing us to be even able to have the conversations we're having now. And I think also his message of it's not about blame, it's about learning. Being someone personally affected by real tragedy that was avoidable, and to come out of that and say it's not about blaming individuals, it's about learning, it's about improving the system. I think I find that really inspirational. I feel like if that person, having had that experience, can do that, we can all do it. I guess how long have we got? I think something I would like to see different. I think less fragmented regulation. I think, and I think partly because of the nature as healthcare has become more complex. The needs have become more complex. It's become more specialised. We now have so many professional bodies. We have so many regulatory bodies, and I'm not sure quite yet how we get around that. A lot of people again come back to how regulation is simpler in the aviation industry, and that's very true. Although 2019 has showed that perhaps that isn't always the glowing standard it should be. I think but I do think less fragmented regulation would make a significant difference. Something to add, I think it was really interesting to me. So I'm recently a new father. I've got a daughter who's going to be 3 weeks old tomorrow, and during the birth of our daughter, I was talking to a student midwife who was about to qualify, and she said that she was really glad that she got in just before the bursary stopped, and she said she had a lot of friends who were considering going into nursing and midwifery and didn't because of how much it was going to cost. And I think it's a real shame that we're not offering that opportunity. I think we're losing out on people who would otherwise come into the profession and add a lot because we're not offering the right sort of support and incentives. So that's something I'd like to see come back, offering more support to people to get into the profession, to work in healthcare, because it's not getting any easier.